Hi, people. Um, this is a persuasive speech that I will be today providing to you for the solutions against the endemic impacts of climate change, because consequences are undeniable, and the environmental degradation that the climate is going throughout that the world needs are solutions that need to be brought forth in a very dramatic way today. The United Nations framework and conference on the climate change conventions, environmental groups such as Greenpeace, climate leaderships have all had their legacies, though that the seeming stress for the alternatives that go placed on people seem to be at a disproportion of what you and I become informed about and what we know and what our chances of having those viable alternative solutions in reach to address the related impacts could be. The culprit behind all of this is that the planet is experiencing the global warming of greenhouse gases. And in the middle of the Shema, as I saw a Business Insider's article from 2015 in December, is that whenever the climate seems to rise in temperature and throughout the overall temperature, so does a growing number of scientists and the people who study the climate who say that it is not a climatological climate advancing change. Being that this differs with every country and with every nation, the involvement is critical though, so that we could independentize our efforts and more viably arrive at a more feasible approach to handle this. This is what my point of view is going to be about to you today. What you can do and what has led up to the present and what we are trying to do for the future to ensure that we limit the amount of climate change that is occurring. Average people, though the contentious experts may say that the concern over the climate change includes your call to immediate action to be voiced. Whether or not you're a student, a newcomer, a novice, somebody who has just learned about climate change, who's just identified with the practicality of it, or you are scholarly and studying it to independently learn what else we can learn from you to do, or if you are a professional. What seems to be part of what we're going to try to understand is that through cooperation, the probability to move towards action and movement should be achieved sufficiently so that we will address it somehow and in some way. The list of climatological issues that are pressuring and stressing our climate range from air pollution, atmospheric processes in the atmosphere. That means that there's more activity, hence more activity in the atmosphere leads to more energy. More energy creates also disturbances in the atmosphere. Deforestation has led to billions upon billions and tons of locked carbon emissions. Invasive species have, in warmer climates, destructively finished tearing down and degrading environments where forests used to be present. So that means more CO2 gets released from these forests. Warming oceans have their consequences as they expand and they warm. More activity that goes right along with global warming. More solar output, more energy trapped by the sun means a warmer planet altogether, more activity. The heat surplus budget grows, it keeps growing. Displaced amounts of precipitation mean that we have more activity in the precipitation cycle that warrants. Massive weather and storm intermittency effects. The list goes on, And in even more depth, it shows the point to our responsibility because we have population stress issues. Population stress issues that are related to health, the climate, food production, so forth, and human impacts, which mean that we need to look at how climate is changing and how it will affect inevitably our lives if we don't take responsibility for it. While we deal with unsustainability, we have to look at melting Arctic ice caps and the loss of sea ice. And yet, we still have climate denial, on the other hand, saying that no, that, it's not a science. It just hasn't happened. The probability says that 1 out of 500, and therefore, statistically, we try to compare and quote, but we cannot be influenced by climate deniers. To voice your concern and to speak on behalf of your concern, the global debate helps when we identify with each situation and take simple and effective steps which will help mitigate the climate challenges and the stresses and the pressures of it. There are numerous ways to resolve that one could be involved with. One is understanding that there are lawful measures that help mitigate the impacts. Once we can become familiar with them, we can try to stay in tune with what governmental policy is reducing political implications of inaction. The conventional conferences of the world try to participate in economies abroad. Therefore, countries are becoming more involved with the scheme of world conferencing, or quote-unquote mega conferencing, for the climate issues. You and I, we're left to try to find alternative ways that we could become involved. These are by going online, perhaps attending environmental sessions, marches, presentations, and that of the sort. But we need more sources to link these pressures so that there is more awareness and that the help helps to strategize in resolving what the climate changing debate is all about. What it is all about is about protection and petitioning. It's about participation and conservation. And therefore, it should also involve environmental groups, yourself, organizations that provoke climate aversion, for which we can seek, and I will provide a brief reference. And moreover, these are the channels where our voice is addressed, where we can address ourselves on these issues and perhaps propagate movement. While presenting these solutions that mitigate the vast array in the poor and lawful regulation of resource depletion, I urge you to say that if you voice against the interest, it's also important that we do so in a unison understanding of these issues which I have just given you. Such doing so wouldn't be because of the issue itself, but because the damage of climate change is going to become irreversible. You cannot relent with your interest and your consensus. You must get involved. I tell you that the future effects that include that the Arctic will most likely be ice-free. We can look at sea level rise from 1 to 2 feet, 1 to 4 feet. Worse, if it ever all melted away, Antarctica, the landmass, would displace the Earth itself, and we can look at tides of 210 feet, but that's being too extreme. Hurricanes will become stronger, more intense. We've seen enough of that, and more drought and heat waves and changes in the precipitation pattern means that we will have frost-free areas and extended and prolonged drought. Temperatures will also continue to stay on the rise. We are looking at problems and problems among problems, so I'm urging you to involve yourself. Look for updates, look for several organizations. Here is a list of them. Climate Reality Leadership Corps, the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, Greenpeace, the Center for Environmental Initiatives, the National Resource and Defenses Council, the International Panel on Climate Change, Save Earth.net, SaveTheClimate.net, 350.org, and also the peoplesclimate.org. But I urge you to take even further action. Once you can become updated, whether you are a student, whether you are a professional, whether you are the novice and the newcomer, whether you are just becoming informed of it, to outreach and become involved. Go to house.gov and find your local district Senate representative for your state in the Congress, and be sure that you try and contact them and influence the decisions which may be proposed so that whenever possible, we do not seek to avoid missing where our voice matters and counts, especially on this delicate climate issue. You're welcome for your time. Thank you.
Bravo. Esto lo vamos a ponerle a la
Este es el que, el cuarto examen. El cuarto. El quinto.
Sí.
Sexto.
Pero es un...
That was a 10-minute presentation, no?
9 minutes.
Yeah.
You did 10?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
That's
So a few seconds.
Pero mira.
They did
Well,
20
you
minutes.
like the
They
fight.
took away for
How
just
they give this
that
boy
minute.
some water?
No, yo ni
Yeah,
idea.
you just some water, que tiene sweating it up.
Medio ambiente. El día la agua, no todo.
They want to say more.
You're welcome.
Oiga.
Está en medio
Y aquí
ambiente.
los
¿No?
sombreros.
No, lo escribí esta mañana.
Lo que viste esta mañana.
No, pero se
Pues
dice
mira,
mañana.
Se lo escribió ahora en un momento.
Mira cómo está
Ahora,
saludando.
Lástima que no me pudiera poder a conversar y hablar así del
Cuando
tema.
yo le pregunté si yo fui al baño, no había ni siquiera terminado lo que
No,
hablaba.
no, que terminó, dijo que
que es verdad todo lo que ha dicho Ángel de eso.
Todo lo que dijo lo escribió aquí en una hora.
Es que dice, si yo lo pudiera hacer, yo digo, hazlo. Porque así ya tú sabes que tú te vas con tu
Sí, ya se
examen.
lo dije que yo mañana yo no sé. Yo tengo
No, y
cosas
es
que
que él
hacer.
después si se va mañana, es que, no, mañana qué,
Mañana ya.
sábado, mañana con el bañito lo va a llevar. Entonces,
Y ya
pues ya lo
está el
tiene.
último, el último